What's going on, everybody? It's that time again. The AllSooners Podcast, episode 148 on this Wednesday, October 5th, 2022. It is OU Texas week. Josh Callaway in Oklahoma City, Ryan Chapman and more, John Hoover in Tulsa. Gentlemen, how are we doing? I'm battling through a bit of a cold here, but I'm trudging on because it's OU Texas week. It's the biggest week of the regular season. Here we go. Let's see what happens on Saturday.
You sound like you better not have COVID, because if you have COVID, you can't go to the game Saturday, and then Ryan will be down on the field all day. So our coverage plans could change. You got to get that swab, man.
Ah,
I'll bring an extra can of sunscreen down to Dallas just in case.
Just in case.
that is a harsh sun in Dallas. There's no game hotter. It's the middle of October. The high is only supposed to be like 80. There's no game hotter than the OU Texas game.
It'll be 100.
Well,
Don't worry. It'll be 100 on field. That's what it always is.
So say whatever it says it is, add like 20 degrees at least. So, but yeah, looking forward to that. OU Texas is, I said it yesterday on the wrap that Hoover and I did on AllSooners.com. Records, throw them out the window in terms of it's as good as college football gets. Very excited for Saturday. It's the best. So it's not exactly the cushiest cover for us. The Cotton Bowl is not convenient in almost any way, where it's located, where you have to park, where the press box is, how do you get to the field temp, all of that, the photo room, like everything is like bottom tier in terms of convenience, but it's still the best because it's just insanity and there's nothing else like it. So looking forward to Saturday. We'll, of course, preview that game a whole bunch here coming up in just a minute. Let's first go ahead and start how we usually do. We won't talk about it long, but finishing touches on the TCU debacle. Have moods changed on it at all since? Because we have our post-game show, which is pretty much right after the game. Obviously, we do post-game, we do some other stuff, but it's the same day. We're still at the stadium. We haven't watched anything back. We haven't even watched highlights hardly yet. And that's our initial gut reactions to things. Anything that's changed, I guess, since you had time to look back at it, feel worse about it for Oklahoma, maybe a little better? I don't know. How do you spin about it, kind of a few days later here?
Well, the players and coaches have been spinning that it's just 5 to 7 plays, 3 to 4 plays here or there. Nothing wrong with the culture, nothing wrong with the effort, nothing wrong with the attitude. A lot of, run fits that didn't happen, or you read something wrong, or fixable mistakes, right? That's what we're led to believe. Didn't look like we felt that way on Saturday night after the game, but that's the report out of Norman this week, first 2 days of the week, Monday and Tuesday, when we talked to him at the press conferences and interviews. So I don't know if I feel any different about it, but clearly after taking a closer look at it, the team does.
Yeah, and you heard that, Brent Venables, and this wasn't Brent Venables saying, like, look, guys, we're really close. Like, it wasn't that. Brent Venables basically said, like, this isn't really worth anything because of how we played, but 40 of those plays were 3 yards or under, right, that they held TCU to. Problem is TCU ran like 80-something plays, which means that half of those plays you failed. And on 6 or 7 of those plays, you failed miserably. And it's the second week in a row we've heard mental errors, technique stuff, all that. Which for me, I felt this way after the game, and watching it back, I feel the same. Like, that's worse for me, that like you're 4 to 5 games in, depending on if you're talking about after K-State or after TCU, and you're still having mental errors, technique issues. Like, you're not even getting to the point of talent, or where can a Todd Bates elevate the defensive line play? Where can Brent Venables and Ted Roof elevate the linebacker play? Because they aren't even in the right gap, or they're not playing the right side of their man. So for me, I feel worse, frankly, because that's not stuff that's going to get fixed in 5 or 6 days. I think Texas is going to put a gaudy point number on the board because of it.
Yeah, I feel probably about the same for Oklahoma. I mean, after the game, we said in the wrap, right, that there was no positive spin to really put on it. And I still feel that way. I mean, if you're going to do it, it would be like we were just saying. And Ryan, you noted it in the post-game wrap after the game on Saturday. How many yards was it on 6 plays? 300 and something? I mean, it
340 basically.
It was a lot on just egregious errors. Now, if you really can truly fix those, then yeah, I mean, it can get a lot better really quick, but I don't have any reason to think that they will get fixed, I guess is really the best way to put that. So we'll see what happens. Ted Roof had probably the funniest line of the week. He's talking about, we don't have any coverages that have guys run 20 yards behind us. I mean, the mistakes were brutal. And we said that at the time. Guy is wide open. I mean, Max Duggan scrambling for 70 yards. That should never happen. You know what I mean? So we'll see if they can button it up. I talked about it a lot last week before previewing the TCU game. I wonder where the confidence level was. Well, that confidence has got to be in the dirt now after what TCU just did to you. So how they bounce back on Saturday when you're going to need, and we're going to talk about the quarterback situation in a second, when you're going to need a good defensive, you got to hold Texas to 20 or less probably to have a shot. So good luck after what we've seen the last couple of weeks, especially Saturday. So we'll see. Definitely don't feel much better about it if you're Oklahoma. It was really ugly, and we'll see how they bounce back from it, how they respond. So Sooners tumble all the way out of the AP poll as expected. They still got 2 votes, which is hilarious.
They got 1 vote. A guy voted on 24th.
Yeah.
So they got 2 points.
Shout out that guy.
Yeah, I know.
I
want
to have it. We need to DM him, have him on.
So I looked for him on Twitter because I was curious as if he's someone that does here's my top 25 and does, like a paragraph blurb on just why he ranked everyone everywhere. He's a TV guy in Connecticut that is per his Twitter bio, admitted UConn basketball fan. And most of his stuff he was tweeting about on Sunday was not even coverage of the Washington Commanders, but just broadcast views and him just being mad that the Commanders stink. So I'm not sure that Oklahoma should feel really great that that is your one champion in your corner to keep you ranked right now.
Yeah, so Oklahoma falls all the way out of the poll. TCU and Kansas get up in there. So the Big 12 is just totally janky right now. Baylor's not ranked either. So Baylor, OU, and Texas all not ranked. Arguably, that was the 3 favorites coming into the year. And TCU, Kansas, and Oklahoma State obviously firmly in there, and Kansas State firmly in the rankings for now. And OU gets to have Kansas come to Norman next Saturday. I don't know what to expect with that game. We'll talk about that a lot next week, obviously. But yikes right now for Oklahoma.
That Oklahoma is 3-2 is not a huge shock. I mean, it's a little bit of a surprise. That they're unranked and that Texas is unranked for the first time in this game is since 1998. Who were the coaches in 98? Mac Brown was a rookie and John Blake was still coaching at Oklahoma. It's also the last time Oklahoma lost 3 games in a row. So we may be going down history lane here, guys. We may be going down memory lane to recount a little bit of history this week if they lose to Texas.
It's pretty amazing that it's been that long since the 2 teams were both unranked, considering how much of a mess Texas has largely been for a lot of that. So it kind of honestly speaks a little bit to more Oklahoma that they're just at this point in the year they're usually still in the mix. Just to kind of not be in the mix on October 5th right now is different, and we'll see if they can turn things around. Marvin Mims has talked a lot about the fact that they, in 2020 they lost 2 Big 12 games in a row, pulled that out against Texas, that crazy game, and then they kind of took off from there. Could that happen? Maybe. I don't know. I mean, different situation, obviously, but we'll find out. So let's talk about the big story, obviously, right now that every Oklahoma fan wants to talk about and is curious about, which is the quarterback situation. Brent Venables didn't give us any injury updates, so we don't know anything about anybody. But it feels very comfortable to say that Dylan Gabriel's not going to play on Saturday. Again, he hasn't been ruled out, but it would be shocking. It'd be very surprising to me, at least. You guys can speak for yourself. If Dylan Gabriel played, he had a pretty bad concussion, especially in today's climate. Coming off the Tua stuff, which I think does matter. It would be really surprising to me if Dylan Gabriel played on Saturday. So your 3 options, essentially, according to Brent Venables at least, are Davis Bevel, who we saw doesn't really work. General Booty, who is a meme but can play a little, maybe. I don't know. And then the freshman Nick Evers, who we kind of all agreed should be nowhere near the field this year. It should be a development year for him, but he may be thrust in there just off of pure necessity on Saturday. So my question to you guys is who would you go with, and what would be the strategy to trying to move the ball on Saturday?
Breaking news, guys. Oklahoma is getting reps to 3 quarterbacks this week. Did y'all hear that noise?
Just a little sound like you're in the car for a second.
Yeah, that was weird. That was coming out of my laptop. Anyway, breaking news: the Sooners are repping 3 quarterbacks at practice. I have it on good authority. I'm getting this word live from out of Norman right now. They rep 3 quarterbacks at practice every week. Breaking freaking news. They bring 3 quarterbacks to road games. This is a home game for them, so they can bring as many as they want. But yeah, the fact that Oklahoma is actually getting snaps to 3 guys in practice should not be a surprise to anybody, because one of their starting quarterback currently is not taking snaps in practice. If it was Dylan Gabriel and 3 guys, that might be breaking news. But no, of course, Nick Evers is getting work. Of course, General Booty is getting a lot of work. And of course, Davis Bevel is getting even more work.
Yeah, it shouldn't come as any shock. And look, I totally understand the reaction from the fan base of, you saw Davis Bevel for a majority of that second quarter, all the third quarter into the fourth quarter, and it looked ugly in Fort Worth. So if you want to lob the, why is it General Booty getting some run? What does that look like? Fine. I don't understand where this Nick Evers needs to start thing is coming from. Guys, this isn't there were 3 quarterbacks on campus in the spring and all that. Like, it was Dylan Gabriel and Nick Evers. And OU, for the entire spring, those coaches, their evaluation every time they talked to us was basically, we need more quarterbacks. We can't let Nick Evers be the backup. We can't do it. They went out and they got not 1, but 2 guys in the portal, 2 guys who have never started at this level. So Oklahoma said, we need someone to be the backup so bad because this kid's not ready, which is not a knock on him. Like, he's just a true freshman. Like, that's not it's not a Nick Evers is doomed, all this stuff. He's just a true freshman, right? And Oklahoma went out and said, we would rather have not 1, but 2 guys who have never started at this level to make sure that Evers doesn't have to be that guy. So that, and again, that's totally fine, but I just can't see in any stretch of imagination where from the start of fall camp to now, Nick Evers has made such a massive jump that he's ready to not just start, but start an OU Texas game. That doesn't make any sense to me. And I get it. Like, Bevel, it wasn't sexy. It wasn't pretty. Just put that to bed. If Nick Evers plays outside of it being a total shock to me, it'll be because Bevel was really bad for the first 2 quarters, and it was a screw it. There's nothing else to throw in there, but you're going to see Bevel for at least a half, I would imagine. And the strategy needs to be, you cannot play tempo. You can't do it. If OU goes in and plays as fast as they've played with Davis Bevel at quarterback, Texas is going to score 100 points because Steve Sarkisian is not calling off the dogs. He's not Sonny Dykes in it and doing anything like that. Yeah. This is his chance to bury Brent Venables, to bury Oklahoma. This is his chance to say, see, we actually have it turned around. And that the way the defense has played, which has been awful, and the way the offense had played even before Dylan Gabriel at TCU, which was awful. If you're running at that pace with Davis Bevel, unless he just getting 1 week of work made all the difference, like, that's a suicide mission. So Oklahoma's got to slow it down and say, okay, if we get a first down and we want to try a tempo on that snap, that's fine. But they've got to find what works for Davis Bevel and slow things down to give themselves a prayer of just shortening this game.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I think that Oklahoma's best shot is to run the ball, work the clock, and try to limit the number of possessions total, as any underdog pretty much goes into a game hoping to do. And that's what Oklahoma is. They're an underdog, big one, on Saturday if Dylan Gabriel doesn't play. It should be more than that because we've seen nothing without Gabriel that suggests that they can move the ball. And the defense has struggled so much the last couple of weeks. Yeah. So limit the number of possessions, shorten the game as much as you can. And I do think that they'll end up starting Davis Bevel, but I think there will be a quick hook. I think that if they get a quarter half in and they're still sitting on 0, they might move to Booty or whatever. I think that's probably how this goes. But I do think Bevel probably winds up starting, even though, again, we haven't seen him a ton, but based on what we saw in Fort Worth, and I mean, it seems like they have pretty much close to no shot to win this game with Davis Bevel, unless, a week of being the guy all week, knowing he's starting, really makes a big difference, which is possible. But, I don't know. Offense it's going to be really hard for Oklahoma this week, obviously, to move the ball at all if you don't have Dylan Gabriel. I mean, that's obvious.
Well, 2 things. I think we should give Davis Bevel the benefit of the doubt for being the guy for an entire week, being the guy who's at the front of the game plan, front of the meeting room. He doesn't have to stand in line waiting for Davis or waiting for Dylan Gabriel to get 8 snaps so he can get his 2. I think he'll be better because he'll be more prepared. He'll be mentally in a place where he can step in and be the starting quarterback. He showed in the bowl game when he came in off the bench. Once he got settled in, he was prepared for that role. He was prepared to take on that much duty as the backup. Now, he hasn't been necessarily prepared the same to this point. Dylan Gabriel has been the starter. He's taken almost all the snaps, even in the blowouts. He didn't come out till late. So the question becomes, how prepared was he last week going into the TCU game, that week of practice? How prepared did Jeff Lebby get him for that role to be able to come in? If something happens to Dylan, I need you to be ready to go and here's what we're going to do. We're going to give you more snaps in practice this week. I think Dylan played poorly enough in those earlier games that it's my guess. I don't have any inside information here. I'm not being fed live via Norman, the information. It's my guess that because Dylan played poorly in those earlier games, at least relatively poorly, that they made an emphasis on getting him more work in practice. And when the emphasis kind of, extra emphasis manifested itself maybe in some missed throws, some hurried throws, some bad footwork, whatever you want to call it. But it also manifested in a probable lack of practice snaps for Davis Bevel. I think if Davis had gotten more practice work last week, maybe he would have been better prepared to come in and do what he did. It didn't look like he was prepared for that role. You know what I'm saying? He came in and his head was on a swivel and he didn't know where to go with the ball. Their blocking was good. The pass protection was good. He was back there looking around, indecisive, didn't know. If your first read, second read's not there, it's time to go. You got to pull it down and get off to, start running or take the check down or something else. He didn't know what to do. And that leads me to believe that they didn't spend a lot of time practicing him, drilling him during the week.
Yeah, and he also, the Peach Bowl, he had the added benefit of he had been in that Pitt system, right, for 3 years. So even though he was the third string and then elevated to the second string for bowl prep, it's a lot easier to make that connection on a short kind of, you're not really prepared to go into the game when you do know the system in and out, right? He held the ball like crazy. All 3 of his sacks, I think, were on him for holding the football. Yeah. And I asked Jeff Lebby about that on Monday was, hey, looked like he was not had that, quarterback clock in his head rolling. Okay, I understand that takes time, but all you've got this week is Davis Bevel standing in a blue jersey. There's no pressure on it. Like, he knows he can't get hit in practice. How do you make that, connection where he's going to be on pace this weekend? And they talked about just, putting him in those situations. I imagine it'll look a lot like Jeff Lebby just standing right behind him, screaming, get the ball out, get the ball out, get the ball out. But we'll see how well Jeff Lebby can prepare the game plan around a backup quarterback, right? And how well they can kind of get that going, because we saw small sample, but in last year's Sugar Bowl when Matt Corral left the game, Ole Miss had no answers, right? That Ole Miss offense against a really good Baylor defense stuttered, looked terrible, barely moved the football. You saw exact same results with Jeff Lebby having to pivot to a backup quarterback, which is a very, very tough thing to do. So now he'll have a whole week to kind of shape the game plan around him. Let's see what Jeff Lebby can kind of cook up for him.
Hey, we talked about it after the game in Fort Worth on Saturday. Some really random Texas quarterbacks have come in there and played well and even won the Texas game. Maybe Oklahoma can return the favor on Saturday with Davis Bevel or General Booty if he gets in there or what. Texas has found a way to do it. This game is wacky. You get into the heat of it, the flow of it. Crazy things happen. Big momentum swings happen. Remember last year, Turk had the punt get blocked. I mean, things like that can change games. So we'll see. It's going to take a lot. But if Dylan Gabriel is out, which I think he will be, I think Davis Bevel's probably the guy, and then they'll go from there. So it's going to be interesting to watch. And again, I mentioned earlier, Brent Venables didn't give updates on anybody. So we don't know about Marcus Major, who he said did miss the game with injury. We talked about that after the game on Saturday. I was told he practiced all week, but obviously something happened at some point that kept him out of the game. So he didn't play on Saturday. We don't know if he's back. That's certainly important. I mean, Javonte Barnes looked really good in his absence, but you like to have all 3 if you can, especially when what we're talking about here, you're going to run the ball a lot probably. So that's a key one to watch as well going into Saturday. You guys think that they'll announce a starter, like some kind of a release, or are we going to go into Saturday just kind of waiting to see who's back there?
No, this is the perfect opportunity for gamesmanship.
Yeah, I think so too.
He did say that Davis Bevel was the first guy off the bench Saturday at TCU. That's been the case all season. He's the backup quarterback. He'll start. The question, guys, I heard a conversation coming home from the studio today. The conversation was, if Dylan Gabriel can practice on Wednesday, then he should be able to start. If he can practice on Thursday, then he should be able to at least suit up and play. That's not the conversation we need to be having. That is not in the realm here. The question is when does he come back? It's not this week. If we learned anything from Tua, it's that you don't get your Hawaiian quarterback hit in the head and bring him right back into the game. That's what Oklahoma would be doing. The difference being it'd be 4 days later. Tua and Dylan, obviously both from the state of Hawaii, but yeah, that's just, you can't, this is not the week. Maybe like 3 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, you might consider something like that. But with Tua bringing concussion protocol and failures by medical teams to handle their business, make a educated determination, review the video, that whole breakdown puts concussion protocol right here, right in front of everybody's eyes. You can't escape it. When your quarterback or anybody else has a concussion now, you can't play around with it. And the NFL's being raked over the coals. The NFL's changing its concussion protocol. The Miami Dolphins medical team's being raked over the coals, deservedly so. And Tua, people are saying, "Hey, what did you really? Was that really a back? No, it wasn't a back issue. You don't lose consciousness while you're running and start to fall down because your back spasms up. That's crazy." So, listen, for Oklahoma's sake, for Dylan Gabriel's sake, I hope he sits out. I hope he takes it easy. I hope he gets himself well and comes back when he's ready and fully healed from what is a traumatic brain injury.
Well, and on top of that, we've seen before, like, okay, there's a difference between it's third down, your quarterback gets hit, his head kind of bops back against the ground. He comes over to the sideline, and then the next drive, he's not out there, and everyone's going, oh, let's find the replay, all that stuff. Oh, they might be a concussion protocol, precautionary. There's a difference in that and getting a late hit directly to your head that leaves you laying on the field for 2 or 3 minutes.
Unconscious.
Where then you go to the injury tent for at least 10 minutes before they take you to the locker. Like, there's a sliding scale of severity with concussions. We don't know a ton about brain injuries, but that's kind of been put out there. And when you look at Dylan Gabriel versus just he fell down and bumped the side of his head, now let's give him the test. Like, this does not seem at any stretch of imagination to be on the minor end of what the concussion scale would be. So Oklahoma's going to rock with a backup quarterback in all likelihood. And like we said, may have got the names kind of mixed up, but Case McCoy's win an OU Texas game. Hurd and Swoops have combined to win an OU Texas game. And that's when the talent disparity was a lot larger versus how Oklahoma was playing and how Texas was playing. This is not a juggernaut Texas team. They're very talented offensively. They've had flashes defensively, but Steve Sarkisian's still the head coach.
Yeah, no, we'll see what happens. And yeah, I mean, I agree with everything you guys said. I don't think, like I said at the beginning, it would surprise me a lot if Dylan Gabriel was playing on Saturday. I really think the conversation is more, does he play against Kansas? Because I think that's far from a given as well. I mean, I think he might be out until after the bye week. So we'll see how that shakes out. But Oklahoma fans are holding on for hope for Dylan Gabriel to play this weekend. You can keep that hope, but I don't think that's where we're headed. Like I said, it's really more of a question: does he play the next week against Kansas? Might be more of a conversation than certainly on Saturday. All right, we'll take a timeout. We'll come back. We'll preview this game a lot more in detail. What do we think is going to happen? What does Oklahoma have to do? What have we thought about their comments this week? We didn't really do a whole lot of the whole like Red River memories thing with Brent or anybody because this we're kind of in a mess of a zone. But we'll talk about all that good stuff coming up next right here on the AllSooners podcast. On Twitter, you can follow AllSooners at @all_Sooners. Ryan is at _Ryan Chapman. Who's at John E. Hoover. I'm at Josh M. Callaway. Our website is AllSooners.com. We are a Fan Nation affiliate, part of the Sports Illustrated Network. All right, segment 2, Oklahoma, Texas, the Red River Showdown this weekend in Dallas. Going to be fun, like I said at the top. It's as good as college football gets. Last year's game was absolutely insane. The crowd was insane. The game was insane. Marvin Mims recalled that this week, who wrote a great story about that. If you want to check that out on AllSooners.com. I don't even know where to begin with this because there's so many storylines going in. There always is for OU Texas anyway, but especially this year with the direction of the two programs, the state of the both coaches who are still obviously relatively new to their program. Sark hasn't been there that long. Is this just his second year or third year?
This
year
is
2.
Second time. Time is mush right now. Second year for Sark, first year for Brent as head coach in this game, obviously. Initial thoughts, I guess, on what Texas is. I think they're one of the harder teams to figure out. So far this year, they're 3-2. They open the year. They have some nice wins. I mean, they crush UL Monroe. They almost beat Alabama on what was the moral victory of the decade, basically. Everybody sang their praises for a loss at home. But they did keep it close, which nobody thought they would against Alabama. Quinn Ewers goes out. They beat UTSA. They lose to Texas Tech in overtime, and then they romp West Virginia, all with Hudson Card. We don't know who's going to play this weekend. It sounds like Quinn Ewers is available, but it's going to be a question. A, Hudson Card's played pretty well. B, do they feel like they need to use Ewers to beat this Oklahoma team and this Oklahoma defense? And then, just C, is Ewers healthy enough to be a full go? So those are the questions that we don't know. So we don't know who's starting for Texas either going into this game on Saturday. But I guess just initial thoughts on this game and what Texas is and how much of a challenge is going to be for Oklahoma to find a way on Saturday.
Yeah, Hudson Card's playing really well right now. Their most impressive win might be the West Virginia win, 38-20. They're coming off last week. Lost to Texas Tech the week before that. Didn't really take care of business early against UTSA, but they did pull away late. Yeah, what is Texas? Texas is a gifted team offensively, skill position players. Watch out for Xavier Worthy, 261 against OU last year, including 75-yarder on the first play of the game on a slip screen. So that's how good Texas is. Texas has the ability to do that to anybody, but especially to a defense that's struggling like Oklahoma's struggling right now. That's something that Oklahoma, Brent Venables, Ted Roof, Todd Bates, those guys, they got to go into this game knowing that this team is explosive. They're capable. They've got Whittington downfield. They got receivers who can do a lot of different things. And, of course, they've got probably the best running back in the country in Bijan Robinson and a really good backup in Roschon Johnson. Now, who's the quarterback? Yeah, that we don't know. But like I said at the top, Hudson Card is playing very good right now. And the better quarterback is sitting on the bench. So if I'm Oklahoma, I got my head on a swivel, man. There's going to be Longhorns coming at them from every direction.
Yeah, and frankly, it doesn't really matter how good Hudson Card is because Adrian Martinez is not any good, and he came in, he looked like a Heisman Trophy candidate. Max Duggan's been bang average his entire career, and he was even better than Adrian Martinez. For this year, at least, the days of making every quarterback you play look like a Heisman Trophy candidate appear to be back as they've played two offensive lines that aren't just paper mache because, sorry, Casey Thompson, but he was just under assault the entire game. On top of that, they're playing the best wide receiver they've seen all year. They're playing the best running back they've seen all year. And I think that the offensive line has been surprising that it's not elite by any means for Texas, but considering how pieced together it's been okay. I think the one thing we do know is the defense, while not great, is better than it was last year. I think it's clear that that's a unit that's at least made some improvements, which contributed to a lot of their collapses last year. They still had the collapse against Tech where they were up, 31-17. Lost that game, and they weren't helped by their most reliable player, Bijan, fumbling right there in overtime. But this is a team that put a ton of points on the board last year in this game. There's no reason to believe they shouldn't put a ton of points on the board this year in this game, barring turnovers. And for as little or much as that defense has improved, on the other side, they're facing an Oklahoma offense that's limping in without their quarterback that didn't look elite and buttoned up even with their quarterback. So this is a massive, massive test because obviously with the emotion of the game we saw, Texas has played one uber emotional game this year. Alabama, they got up for it. They'll be up for this one. And if that defensive line plays anything like they did against Alabama, this is going to be ugly.
How low is the confidence level for Oklahoma defensively going into this after what TCU did to them, which was even greater than what Kansas State did to them the week before. You're going against all the guys you just said: BJ Robinson, Roshan Johnson, Xavier Worthy. I mean, this is the best skill talent that they've seen, and Hudson Card's playing pretty well. Quinn Ewers, in the little bit we saw this year, looked pretty good if he's the guy. I mean, is there any hope for Oklahoma defensively in this game? I mean, or is it just kind of you're gonna have to hope for some big turnovers, or I mean, what's the recipe, I guess, for Oklahoma to slow Texas down? Is there one, or is it just kind of they're cooked and
Well,
we'll see what happens?
you mentioned it earlier, Josh. The recipe is control the clock offensively, minimize Texas's possessions by running the football and throwing short passes, slowing down that tempo. Jeff Lebby's nature is to put the foot all the way to the pedal and put the pedal all the way to the metal and smash it down and go as fast as you can. You can't do that when your defense is on the ropes like Oklahoma's defense has been. So that's as Brent Venables mentioned. I think it was Saturday, a recipe for disaster. An offense that can't stay on the field and a defense that can't make plays or is having catastrophic busts. He said the words, a recipe for disaster. And he did say that, by the way. I double checked. But you've got a receiver in Jordan Whittington who's co-leader on the team with 21 catches. Jatavian Sanders is a tight end who's got 20 catches right behind him and Whittington and Worthy. Sanders as a tight end, 6'4", 240, 50-pound tight end. He's a guy that can absolutely eat up the middle of the field. Think about what Kansas State did with their tight end and how, they didn't have massive big-time receivers and massive big-time running backs running everywhere like Texas is going to have. They did have Deuce Vaughn. They did have Malik Knowles. But Texas has better overall skill position players than those guys, and the tight end was still getting wide open. So that's another scary aspect of this offense. The defense has got to, when the opportunity comes, make a tackle. When the opportunity comes, cover a guy. When the opportunity comes, turn around while you're running with a guy and bat the football down or make a play on the football or find the football. We saw them doing that on Monday night after practice. So they've got to make plays when the plays are there to be made, and then also eliminate the catastrophic 60, 70, 80-yard touchdowns, because Texas will do that to you. You put all those things together, you've got a chance.
Oklahoma's doing what Texas has done for a decade, which is saying, in this game, you can throw out the records. Weird stuff happens in this stadium. It's one of those really fun games for that reason. Because on paper, there's no reason Oklahoma should be in this game. There's no reason this should be a 2-possession football game from what I'm seeing. And let me ask you guys this. This is something I genuinely don't know, but with all the questions asked of Ted Roof and Brent Venables this week about the scheme, right? Do you need to simplify it? Do anything else? And they basically both were pretty defiant. Ted Roof said, when we got here, we evaluated the personnel and we only implemented the stuff that we thought the personnel could do. Brent Venables said, we're going to be multiple. We got to teach to be multiple. With all that being said, on the other side of the football, do either of you have faith that Jeff Lebby's going to eat the clock? I have none. I think that Jeff Lebby's going to come in and say, this is our offense. This is what we do. It doesn't matter if it's Gabriel or Bevel, and they're going to try and run it quickly. I've got no faith that Oklahoma's going to take the step back and say, I get that's our identity, but situationally, it doesn't make any sense.
I think we've seen Lebby adapt to what's happening on the field. We saw it in the Kent State game, maybe, where there were a couple of 1-minute possessions that were 3-and-outs and a couple of 1-minute possessions that were touchdowns. And he looked up and realized, we're getting lapped. We're getting tripled on time of possession. I probably need to do something. And so they came out, ran the football, had a 3.5-minute possession or a 4-minute possession, whatever it was. He showed the ability to adapt. And now what he needs is Brent Venables boot up his ass to say, hey, slow it down. He's the boss. Brent Venables is the boss. You got an offensive coordinator. The offensive coordinator has to do what the head coach says. So if the OC's out here going tempo, 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 and the defensive coordinator's going, guys, we can't keep up, the head coach is going to step in and tell him what to do.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's funny because it was after that Nebraska game, the conversation was so heavily about the complementary football and how well the defense fed off the offense fed off the defense, back and forth. And it's like the polar opposite, especially on Saturday, where quick possessions leading to touchdown busts and then quickly another 3-and-out. You're right back out there. It's like you have to have that harmony. And you saw that a little bit early in the year, especially against Nebraska, and then has abandoned them completely the last couple of weeks, especially obviously in Fort Worth on Saturday. So seeing how that shakes out and if Jeff Lebby can adapt is going to be important because, again, I mean, you're not going to have a guy, whether it's Bevel or Booty or Evers, you're not going to have a guy that you're going to say, go out there and throw it 40 times and win us this game. That's not on the table. So, yeah, I mean, you're going to have to adjust and play to the fact Oklahoma's not often, again, I know it's only 7 points like we said earlier, but like Ryan said, there's no reason this game should be close. Oklahoma is a huge underdog in reality. If you're watching these teams and you know what to expect, it's going to take a lot for Oklahoma to win. So Oklahoma has to play like that, and they don't normally have. When is OU ever a huge underdog going into a game? Not often. So Lebby, Venables, they have to go in with that almost like little school mentality of like, we got to do everything we can to keep it close and hope that we can pull it out in the fourth. So that we'll see how that looks. What have you guys thought of Brent and the coordinators and the players this week? Their reactions to how Saturday has played out, because it's been kind of weird, I guess, at least from my perspective. Just kind of the way that they're reacting to all this negative. After so much positive, all this negative the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, you're right, Josh. I've noticed some body language on the parts of Lebby, Ted Roof, and even Brent. Some body language, you ask them a tough question and they give you one of these, kind of puff their chest out a little bit and bristle their back. I've seen it. You see, you trust the information that your eyes give you, and my eyes are giving me that information. So I think there's something there. I think there's something to it, and I think that they're finding a bumpy road is a difficult drive. So they're having to kind of get a little bit out of character from when there was no games being played, there was no losing going on, there was no records being set defensively, or the team's not going 70 yards for a touchdown every other play. It was easy back then. It was easy when it was just training camp, and it was easy when they were 3-0 to answer those questions. So I think you're spot on.
Yeah, Brent definitely seemed to be a bit more, I don't know if fiery is the right word, but a lot more energy to his Tuesday presser, which had been lacking all season long, frankly, right? Like we had noted that from UTEP week before they've even played a game, that his Tuesday presser was much more quiet, composed, just different. But sure as hell don't ask about Jaron Kanik. That's what we learned this week.
I don't know what's up with that kid. Yeah, Ted Roof. Ryan asked him about Ted Roof, and Roof really pushed back on that one. He did not like that. So,
hey, I think they've all shown moments of, why are you asking me that, you jerk? Not that that's coming out of their mouth, but like I said, you read the body language and read their facial expressions. Jeff Lebby finished his question to me about RG3 talking about his Dylan Gabriel's mechanics breaking down. He finished his question to me. I was on the far left side of the room to Jeff Lebby's left, and he was looking over here to the right. Like he turned his back to me or something during the question. It was really kind of bizarre. And then I asked a follow-up question, and he answered that as well. I mean, to these guys' credit, listen, let's give them credit. They're going through some really difficult stuff, personally, professionally, whatever you want to say. They're fully, as men, as human beings, and as families and everything else, they're fully invested in this thing. So to have it kind of back up like it is, and pop in their face, so to speak, and then show up. Listen, this is why they're paid the big bucks, to coach well, to find answers when they're not, and then to provide answers when things go bad. Okay. This is why they're paid the big bucks, but I feel for them. I have a little bit of sympathy for the fact that they're going through something right now as a staff, a first-year staff. You don't usually step into things like this at a place like Oklahoma.
Yeah, certainly have no problem with it. Just a different edge. Like it's noticeable. There's a different edge. There have been a couple of times where you could tell, like especially Brent, you could tell he really just wanted to brush off a 2 or 3 word answer to the question. And then the awkward silence that he came back and said, well, I better fill that silence with a little bit more kind of the recognition of, I want to answer the question like this, but I know for you to do your job, what you need from me is another sentence or two so that you can print something.
Well, Brent asked Barry Trammell, remember, about the defensive, installing the defense instead of some kind of hybrid that better fit the existing personnel. And his response was, what would be the alternative? What choice did we have? He hasn't. And then to me, of course, was I said that. Are you sure I said that? You're not putting words in my mouth. I actually said those words. Yeah, you actually did. And then Roof, same thing. The question you referenced earlier, Ryan, was an answer. The answer, I guess, you referenced earlier was an answer to my question. And he said, hey, no, it was about communication from the booth to the coaches on the sideline wearing the blue shirts and the blue hats, doing all the signaling, to Brent Venables doing his extra, signals at the last second. I asked about the mechanics of getting the play in, because at some point there's a breakdown in communication when the other team's going 70 yards for a touchdown and there's nobody within 20 yards of them. I said, that's probably a breakdown. And he said, I know what plays you're talking about. We don't have any plays. We don't have any defensive calls where we let the guy go by 20 yards. So You're right. They're agitated by losing. They're probably losing sleep. They're probably, hearing the social media and the sports talk radio and all that stuff. And they're probably getting some feedback from their players, and who knows what's going on in the staff room. Right. And then they show up to the press conference and here's a bunch of jerks like us asking these questions like, how dare you question me? How dare you question our methodology? You're not a football coach. At least they're not going the Mike Stoops route where he says, well, you guys are just regular people. You have no idea. That was one of the all-time jerk answers.
It's a pretty good one. Hoover and Mike Stoops, rivalry as old as time. The whole Stoops family, apparently, but especially Mike.
Why you got to lump Drake in there? Drake doesn't have any problem with me.
That you know of.
That I know of. That's true.
Well, we were referring the legendary Isaac Stoops John Hoover rivalry.
No,
Carroll,
that doesn't exist.
All of them. Yeah, Brent. Brent especially. He definitely had a bit of an edge, a spice to him that he hasn't had. We haven't even mentioned, the fact that he was talking about, first off, he talked about this week's game and having that extra edge for the OU Texas game, and he said, I don't really look at it that way. You should be excited to play every week. So that's not his approach. So we got to peek behind the curtain there, or at least in terms of his approach to quote unquote big games. That's not what he preaches. He wants it to be the same every week. No getting up for OU Texas. And he did the same thing, kind of in a roundabout way after the Nebraska game, where he was asked about that being a statement win. And he was like, well, just a win. Doesn't matter that's Nebraska. Doesn't matter that we won by 1 million on the road. Just another win. Flush it on to the next one. That's kind of his approach. A very regimented, we do the same thing every week. Results don't dictate what we do. Our approach, the opponent. That's how Brent Venables goes week to week. Now, that may work down the road. Right now, 3-2. He lost a couple games in a row. We'll see if that changes at all going in the future. And then he also, we haven't talked about the fact he was referencing last year's OU Texas game. He talked about all the one-score games. He talked about the act of God it took to beat Kansas last year, where it's almost like he's making a point in so many words of, hey, just so you realize they could have lost a lot more games last year. It's the difference in winning and losing. The margin is small. It's not as big as it seems. Easily could have lost more games last year. So far this year, we can button us with things, maybe win more. So it's gonna be interesting to see how that plays out. But yeah, Brent was different on Tuesday than he typically is. That was obvious.
Get a little bit of fighter out of him. That's what I kind of texted you guys. We had a conversation after the Tuesday press conference last week, right ahead of TCU, of this is not good body language, all that stuff, right? And I think I texted you, Josh, right after, like in the press conference, Brent kind of makes his act of God to beat Kansas comment, which was just hilarious, first off. But I think I texted you, it's like, at least you've got Brent projecting that he's fighting right now, because whatever he is behind closed doors at practice, the players also see the stuff from the midweek and all that stuff, that they're just like us. They live on social media, all that stuff. It's like, if nothing else, at least you got Brent projecting this fighter mentality this week, as opposed to just the kind of, it's tired, we're going to fix it, I've got no answers from last week.
Yeah, I took that, Ryan, probably like a lot of things, I guess, differently than a lot of other people did when he said the act of God against Kansas, right? He's talking about Caleb Williams reaching in, grabbing that football from Kennedy Brooks and getting a first down that helped preserve the game. He mentioned 6 Texas was one of 6 games that they won on the last possession or within one possession. A lot of people took that as a shot to Lincoln Riley. It might have been, but I think it was more directed at the fan base that, that team, he was reminding the fan base, I think, that team won 11 games last year, but they nearly lost 6 others in addition to the ones they did lose. So I think he's probably just reminding people, y'all may be spoiled a little bit as a fan base, and that's not necessarily the best thing to be when you're introducing a new coaching staff that's trying to introduce a new culture and frankly rebuild what was beginning to crumble a little bit last year. We talked about this, I think, in the post game. How many all Big 12 players did Oklahoma have on the preseason team this year? 1, and it was the punter. So are we surprised that 5 defensive guys go give up their final year of eligibility and go to the NFL and the defense isn't any good? I don't think we should be surprised. So maybe not to the level that we saw Saturday, but certainly this shouldn't be that unexpected. And they're trying to learn a new system and they have a new coaching staff. It's just a bad time for all those things to come together.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was, I think we said that after the game on Saturday of, you have to give Brent Venables time. If you're an OU fan that's ready to call it on him, that's ridiculous. He needs more time. But at the same time, you shouldn't lose by 30 to TCU. That should never happen.
Right.
So both those things can be true in terms of needs a little more time to get to change. You're talking about a guy changing a culture and completely overhauling a roster. That takes, a little bit of time. It does. So we'll see how that looks. Final thoughts on this game before we close the book on it and head down to Dallas on Saturday.
There's, by the way, no comparisons to Bob Stoops in '99. There's no comparisons.
Right. It's totally
was 6 years in a row, I think 5 years in a row without a winning record. 3 years in a row was the worst 3-year stretch in school history. Bob came in and coached his butt off and hired a great staff that coached their butts off and did a good job in that first class of recruiting. But he took John Blake's players and said, guys, you are not losers. You are winners. And they won 7 games. And people look back now and say, yeah, but they only won 7 games in Bob Stoops' first year. That was a freaking miracle that they won 7 games. So, no, you're being an idiot if you're revising history like that.
Yeah, it's not the end-all be-all, but the red flags are there. Red flags are there.
For sure. Going to be interesting. See what happens on Saturday. The next installment could be the first. What was it? First 3-game losing streak since 98?
98.
Dang. And you're pretty big underdogs.
On the flip side, if little OU Texas magic happens in this thing, right? Suddenly you're looking up and OU is back to 4-2, hosting a Kansas team coming in. If you can get another win, go into the bye week, get your quarterback healthy, and also they'll have rid a 5-game winning streak against Texas. Like that, it's a 4-game streak on the line right now. You tell me that Brent Venables wouldn't be able to love to go to all those recruits and just be like, oh, by the way, we were at like rock bottom and still beat the crap out of Texas physically and got a win on the scoreboard.
It's gonna be interesting. I don't know if you guys saw it all. I didn't watch the whole thing, but I just saw a couple of clips. But his coach's show on Monday, Brent talked about not wanting pity, not wanting to be looked at as poor Oklahoma. Look how rough they have it, and he promised that they were gonna. I don't know. Did he say give them hell on Saturday? Something like that on Saturday in Dallas. So we'll see. I mean, the tenor of the early part of the Brent Venables era is going to take a big swing on Saturday one way or another. Because even if they come out there and play hard and battle and keep this thing close, I think that's a net win for him in the public eye. If they get crushed again, it's not going to be pretty. So we'll see. Going to be fun. Always is. But especially the fact that the two teams both have 2 losses already and whoever loses is going to be in straight disaster mode almost makes it more fun. It's going to be chaos on Saturday, and I can't wait. All right, we'll take another timeout. We'll come back. Some other things to button up. Little recruiting update, and we'll look around the Big 12 this weekend. Some more big games as the conference starts to take shape. All that good stuff coming up next on the AllSooners Podcast. Final segment of the AllSooners Podcast, episode 148, on this Wednesday, October 5th. get through some last few things here. We'll send you on your way into your OU Texas weekend. I'm sure everybody's still heading down there. Is the best. Excited for Saturday. We'll have tons of coverage for you from the Cotton Bowl, from the fair on Saturday in Dallas. It's going to be a fun one, as it always is. Get to some other things here. Start with a recruiting update. So we did the show last week, and David Hicks, the number 1 defensive lineman in the 23 class, was committing Wednesday afternoon. We talked about that on the show. The timing wasn't great for us. We kind of just kept things broad, and he surprised a lot of people and committed to Texas A&M. Who, you nailed it. You said that you felt like he was going to kind of spurn OU and go A&M, which he was still favored OU. It was surprising that he put on the Aggie hat for most. Big loss for OU, obviously. I think most people think an NIL has played a very big part in that, losing that one. But what a tough loss for Oklahoma, because you felt like you were in the driver's seat to get this, like we said last week, potentially program-altering recruit. You felt like you were in good shape for months, and then A&M swoops in, and you hate to say steals him, because that sounds bad, but last second, it almost feels like swiped him. Tough loss there for Oklahoma last week.
It was apparently because he's a guy that can change. He's a guy with that kind of talent that can change the culture of the program by establishing, you're moving off to the SEC. So you're establishing what a defensive lineman mentality, the kind of team that Clemson looked like. Clemson isn't an SEC team. They play in the ACC, but they kind of portray themselves as an SEC type team. They're in that region of the country. They recruit against the SEC, and they land those guys and they win national championships. Hey, imagine that. So yeah, he's one of those guys that Brent Venables identified, Todd Bates identified. We got to have this dude. And it didn't work out because apparently he woke up that morning wanting to go to Oklahoma and was convinced he was going to Oklahoma. I don't know all the inside stories, but I know, again, what I see, body language, facial expressions. He and his mom were portraying one thing, and his dad was portraying something completely different. Maybe his dad was leaning toward A&M. Maybe his mom was leaning toward OU. But if you just look at David's face, Hicks's face, I mean, he looked like he was not all that thrilled to have revealed that he's going to A&M. I'll tell you what, I'll pitch it to Ryan here before I move on with my point that Oklahoma's recruitment, believe it or not, is not quite over of David Hicks.
Yeah, no, I mean, anytime it's the exact same conversation we had with Anthony Evans, right? Okay, so congrats. If you get a commitment day flip, that's not the end all be all. That's not the end of that story whatsoever. And you better believe that Oklahoma, I'm sure with the way that things went, they'll sit back, take a week maybe, and take a deep breath and go, oh God. And then that group will get right back at it. Because like you mentioned, they've got, and here's the thing for Oklahoma fans, we kind of talked about if it went the A&M way, okay, you've still got PGA DeBoer, you've still got Colton Vasek, you've still got Derek LeBlanc. Like, this is not last year where Gabriel Brownlow-Dindy isn't coming, and all of a sudden you're like, well, there's not a lot of quality depth there recruiting-wise. But having all those guys plus a Hicks really alters what your ceiling can be. So it's not all sunshines, rainbows, and unicorns in College Station either, right? David Hicks was on hand to see Appalachian State whoop A&M physically, right? And so a loss against Kansas State, a loss against TCU, don't think that'll do much if seeing Texas A&M drop it to Appalachian State didn't alter that decision. So this thing should be something to watch across the finish line again, especially with all the chaos in College Station.
Yeah, and A&M, it didn't go much better for them. A&M had about a similar weekend as OU on Saturday, as Mississippi State punched them in the mouth a little bit there. So yeah, I don't think it's over necessarily. Tough loss for Oklahoma, obviously, but still time. Signing day still a couple months away. Never know how these things shake out. Oklahoma's certainly been on the wrong end of some, commits that decommit and flip in recent years. No reason to think you couldn't go the other way with it. They're still working on Peyton Bowen, of course, who's been a Notre Dame commit for forever. So you never know. Still some time before signing day. Maybe things will change. Another guy Oklahoma's chasing in the 24 class, David Stone. He's the number 2 defensive lineman in that class 24. Originally from Del City, moved to Florida. Bradenton, Florida is where he's at now, IMG Academy. Who you got an interview with him that's going to be on AllSooners.com. Why don't you give people a little sneak preview of that?
Yeah, coming up tomorrow, we're going to get that story posted. Talked to David Stone over the weekend last week, and just asked some questions, obviously about David Hicks. He had some things to say. He said he was surprised, he was caught off guard. He really wanted to play with him at the next level, he said, and he really, everything that he heard was that he was coming to Oklahoma. He was convinced that he was going to be a Sooner. Keep in mind, David Stone still hasn't committed to anybody yet. He's 24, but there's a lot of crystal balls and there's a lot of forecasts and all that good stuff about him coming to Oklahoma. There's a presumption that he's going to come to Oklahoma. He told me he's been an OU fan all his life. His dad used to make him watch the games. He didn't want to watch the games, but then he started playing and he understood what it was about. And he's been following Oklahoma football ever since then. So we'll have a story on that tomorrow, including his reaction to David Hicks, what he's going to do about recruiting David Hicks if he does go to Oklahoma, what he decides to do in terms of recruiting David Hicks. Now, keep in mind, David Stone, the 24 from Del City via IMG, he's not committed, as I said, but he is also being considered. He's being recruited heavily and is considering Texas A&M. So he hasn't ruled out A&M. He said he wanted to play with Hicks at the next level. Well, guess what? Hicks has said he's playing at A&M. So could get interesting. I had a good conversation with him, found out a lot that I didn't know. So we'll have that tomorrow at allsooners.com.
Yeah, Stone's somebody that I was out at Del City and Booker T it was like week 1 or week 2 last year.
Yeah.
And I was obviously out there trying to get a look at Gentry Williams and Micah Tees, just as that was kind of the Gentry Williams specifically was the current class coming up. And Gentry was still working his way back from injury, so he wasn't anywhere close to 100%. But David Stone was still by far the best player on the field with a Micah Tees, with a Gentry Williams. And it wasn't close. It wasn't close. So interested to see what he kind of looks like after getting that year this year to challenge himself against just frankly more talented people every day when you go and play at a spot like IMG.
Hey, real quick, David Stone tweeted minutes after David Hicks committed to Texas A&M. He tweeted, "Do not make the assumption that I can be bought," and NIL was not going to drive his decision. He told me what he meant by that. He expressed a little bit more and kind of elaborated on his thoughts on NIL and what's going to be important to him in his recruiting. And it's not NIL. Can't wait to share that with you guys. AllSooners.com tomorrow.
Yeah, that'll be good stuff for sure. A guy Oklahoma's chasing, Oklahoma kid, obviously, like we were saying. So it surprised me too for these guys like David Hicks, like David Stone, guys who, and it's far from a given, but you're hoping to make it the NFL, right? Short-term monetary gain and NIL as opposed to what gets you in a better shape for NFL. I would think that's an easy choice. Not to say that A&M couldn't be a better spot for Hicks in that area. But if that is really what was the deciding factor, that surprises me. That's very short-sighted to me. But we'll see. And I'm not saying that's the factor. I don't know David Hicks. But if that's the case, so what David Stone's approach in that tweet, that makes more sense to me. So we'll see how that shakes out. Should be good stuff with Hoove and Mr. Stone tomorrow. This one, I never got to see him play at Del City. He also was a really good basketball player at Del City too. Just monster all around. One of those just freaks in every capacity in a good way. So looking around the Big 12 this weekend, obviously OU Texas. It's funny that OU Texas is the only game that doesn't have a ranked team in it in the entire Big 12 this weekend. Go figure. Bob Bowlesby / what's the new guy's name? I blank on the new guy's name. Yormark are dancing with this weekend, and Sankey's wondering what the heck. So the big one this week, if you want to call it, I mean, I guess it's the big one. TCU and Kansas, both are undefeated, top 20 teams. College Game Day is going there, but the game's still at 11 o'clock on FS1, which is hilarious to me. That College
At least
Game Day
it's not streaming.
It's not streaming. You can watch it on regular TV, but FS1 that's got to be a first. No way College Game Day has ever gone to a game that's on FS1 before. No way. So that's where they'll be this weekend. Tech is in Stillwater, and the Wildcats, Kansas State, are in Ames. Baylor has the weekend off as well as West Virginia. This conference is weird because, like I mentioned earlier, the 4 teams that are ranked don't include OU, Baylor, or Texas, which is just very upside down. But are all eyes on TCU Kansas for you guys? Or are you guys kind of eyeballing the other ones a little bit?
Yeah, it's TCU Kansas. FS1, by the way, OU Texas is on ABC. FS1 is the second most visible property this week. The other game, Texas Tech and Oklahoma State, is on FS1, and then K-State Iowa State, that's over on ESPNU. So FS1 getting some good run in the Big 12 this week with TCU and Kansas.
And that's why the dollars are elsewhere, which is why the money programs will be elsewhere here in a couple of years. That's something Yormark's going to have to work on. Yeah, I mean, all eyes, I guess, are on TCU and Kansas as my boys, my Jayhawks out there. We did it, guys. We've done it. We've gotten College Game Day football to Lawrence, to hashtag pack the booth. I can't wait. I can't wait to see what what Kansas Jayhawk legend has to introduce themselves in the hype video so everyone knows who they are. That will be a ton of fun this week as well. Shout out to Todd Reese. And but that one's the one, because TCU, if they go into Lawrence, all of a sudden they're 5-0 with a couple of wins over Oklahoma and Kansas, and you're going, okay, year one, Sonny Dykes, they've got the skill position talent, right? What you didn't know is what that defense was going to look like in year one and what that offensive line is going to look like. If they can go and get that, then suddenly that's another team that you have to cautiously, keep one eye on as far as who's going to be playing in Arlington.
Hey, Ryan, if K1, Kyler Murray, has to introduce himself on the Arizona Cardinals video, hey, Sooner fans, Kyler Murray here, then Todd Reesing can introduce himself on the KU videos.
I guess. It's just it's a tough look all around. Just, again, guys, it's video. It's PSA for everyone. Lower third, just put their name. Don't make them say it. Just put their name. It's not necessary. Looks better all around.
You guys surprised that Kansas is a 7-point home underdog?
No.
TCU?
No.
Vegas is not buying Kansas yet.
Well, people who are wagering on the game and people who are setting the lines are waiting for the other shoe to drop. Just like when they set the Oklahoma-Texas line on Sunday or whatever it was. Texas was a 1-point favorite. Now they're a 7-point favorite. So that line immediately corrected. I think that's normal. I think people are waiting for Kansas to implode because we've been treated to 20 years of bad Kansas football, or at least 15 years of bad Kansas football. And not just bad, but really, really epically bad Kansas football.
There's that, which is like the human element of it. And then the other side is there are tons of just very complicated models, stats, all that stuff. Kansas's defense has not been statistically good, right? Ton of points to West Virginia. Didn't just come in and lock down Duke. You know what I mean? Didn't lock down Houston. Tennessee Tech is not a game that should factor into anyone's anything. So really, the Iowa State game is the first time we saw, okay, Kansas battened down the hatches and played really good defense. And again, just Quentin Johnson, Darius Davis, Kendre Miller, Max Duggan playing the way that he's playing right now. I think everyone takes the TCU offense over the Iowa State offense. So I think people are still kind of waiting to see, all right, you haven't really played an actual explosive offense yet. Here's TCU. Is Jalen Daniels going to be able to keep up and not make those mistakes? I think that's kind of a natural thing, as much as we all in our hearts love that Kansas football is ranked in hosting College Game Day because of what Hoover said, what Kansas football has been historically.
Yeah, and not to rain on the Kansas parade, but I mean, if Iowa State can make a field goal, they very well might lose, last weekend at home to an Iowa State team that we all don't think is particularly great. So we'll see what happens this weekend. It's going to be fun to keep an eye on that. Obviously, a team that OU just played, a team they'll play next when Kansas comes to Norman next Saturday. Going to be fun. Yeah, the TV designations. You wonder why OU Techs are going to the SEC. Look no further than the TV designations this weekend. OU Techs on ABC, FS1, ESPNU for the other three. When OU Texas, again, is the only one with unranked teams in it. Kind of crazy. That shows you where those brands are relative to the rest of the league. Elsewhere, in the NFL, the Panthers are bad. The Panthers are really bad. Baker's in a tough spot. Kyler Murray beats Baker Mayfield on Saturday for the third time. So Kyler's now 3-0 against Baker in the NFL. Cardinals aren't great, but they still cruise by the Panthers. Meanwhile, Jalen Hurts and the Eagles still undefeated. It's unbelievable. We talked about that a lot last week. What an unbelievable start for him. They win another one in what was just like a torrential downpour there in Philadelphia. Elsewhere, Ramondre Stevenson is having a really nice year with the Patriots. Trey Norwood's done some nice things with the Steelers. What are some early things that you guys have caught your eye, I guess, in the early part of the year for Sooners at the next level here?
What do you mean the Cardinals aren't good? They're in a tie for first place.
They aren't good.
They're 2-2, and everybody in that division is 2-2. I know because I'm a Rams fan and I suffered through that Monday night trash. Yikes. Yeah, boy, you're right about Baker. Baker's in a tough spot.
It stinks.
It's not getting any easier either because his head coach is getting ready to be fired and probably take the first college job he can get out of town on. The offense isn't getting any better. The defense isn't particularly good. But here's the deal. Put the game in Baker's hands late in the game, and he's come up short. I want to say 2 times this year. He's come up short, had opportunities to generate, late touchdown drives or late scoring drives. And I think he's fired on a couple of easy throws, a la Dylan Gabriel almost. Guys are open, or he's not seeing them, or he's not reading them, or he's not hitting them with the pass. It's a tough situation. And especially when you're having to go up against the guy who was your backup and everybody is in agreement that he's better than you were. That's a tough situation for Baker to swallow. And then Jalen Hurts comes in, and he's the one that's not even supposed to be here in the NFL. Look at how good he's doing. He actually has playmakers around him. He actually has a really good defense behind him. So that's been an impressive turnaround. But still, I was watching First Take this morning, or Get Up, or whatever it was, and it was on in the background, and they were scrolling across the bottom. Who's your Week 4 MVP candidate? And Jalen Hurts was getting a lot of votes. So congrats to him.
Yeah, he rebounded from a really bad pick 6 too to have a good performance in the rain there for Philly. So it's not just been like, hey, sunshine, unicorn. Like he's had to respond to a little bit of adversity, and he's done that well. Guys, Baker's been really bad. For 4 weeks, it's not all his fault. Carolina's really bad. Baker's been awful. He has one of the worst passer ratings in the league.
32.
He was laughably bad in the first half against the Browns. Now he picked himself up, and they probably should have won that game had the Browns not been helped by a pass interference or roughing the passer on that last drive. He was really bad in week 2. It's okay to say Baker's been really bad. He's in a bad situation, and he's not making it any better at all. It was so bad that Matt Rule led off his post-game press conference and then doubled down again in the weekly press conference that Sam Darnold is still hurt, and so there will be no change at quarterback. It's okay to say it, guys. Baker's been really bad, and he may be looking for a backup job next year because he's done nothing to make any GM think, well, the offensive line stinks. He doesn't have skill position, and there's nothing else Baker can do because he's just missing throws.
We thought Baker was better than this. And let me ask you guys this. I brought this up on my radio show. We thought Dylan Gabriel was better than what he's playing right now. Now, concussion not included, of course. Is there something to be said about walking into a new system, a new offense, a new players, new personnel around you, and not being really sure of yourself? And because Baker's an extremely accurate quarterback. All we've seen out of Dylan Gabriel is very good accuracy rate, and we're seeing both those guys miss wide open receivers. Like what? Like my 21-year-old son who hasn't thrown a football in 2 years could probably throw that ball better than what Baker or Dylan did. You know what I'm saying? So where does that come from? And the fact that they're both new guys in a new system on a new team makes you wonder if there's this adjustment period that they're just not comfortable yet.
Yeah, it'll be interesting, especially with some of the mechanical issues that Gabriel's had, right? Even that, I think that shows you that it plays into you're not sure of what you're doing, or you're feeling a different pressure for the first time. I think for Gabriel, he's not said it, but when you have a bad game at UCF is the largest undergraduate, right, in the country, or one of them, but they're not Oklahoma football fans, right? You have one bad game at Oklahoma, and you have the weight of all of social media on your shoulders. And I think it was blatantly obvious that that's a guy that was pressing. And we know that Baker has been in situations where he has pressed before. And it almost took a lot of those losses that Lincoln Riley and Baker Mayfield had together as the OC and quarterback were like, hey, Baker, you tried to play hero ball and stopped running the offense, right? You think about Houston specifically, the Ohio State game. That was like quintessential. You put the offense in bad spots because you didn't just take the dump offs that were there because you wanted to be the hero. You can't do that at the NFL, and you can't do that when you've got inferior talent around you than what you're seeing with most defenses.
Yeah, no, I wonder with Baker where the confidence level is. I mean, we know that he's somebody who plays with a lot of confidence normally. That's when he's at his best. And you got to, after being cast aside, nobody, and then having a hard time finding another team. And then whenever we all said at the time, that's probably not going to work, the Panthers, because they don't have a lot there. Matt Rule's going to get fired, like Hoof said. Not a good situation, and he's not off to a good start. You lost to the Browns in week 1 without Watson. It's not like they had Brissett. I mean, it's tough. I mean, the Falcons beat Jacoby Brissett and the Browns on Sunday. That kind of lets you know on that. So, yeah, it's not good for Bake. And I agree with Ryan. You probably you ride out this year as best you can. Probably a backup moving forward. Maybe get another shot at some point and you make the most of it. But I think the reality for OU fans is setting in a little bit that he's just an okay quarterback. He's not going to be an NFL win a Super Bowl guy. And they had that opportunity with the Browns. It was there. Had that 1 year. They were in the second round, had a shot, didn't capitalize, and now here we are. So kind of tough deal for Baker all around there. And Kyler 3-0. That's going to be tough. You don't want to be 0-3 to Kyler, the guy who, like who said, was your backup and was behind you, younger than you. That's an ouchie for Baker there, for Kyler to be 3-0 against him. So we'll see what happens this weekend for all those guys. Great start for Jalen. Unbelievable stuff there. So that's it for us, I think. Good show. I powered through. I'm running out of steam a little bit, but we're all right. We're making it through. Going to be fun on Saturday. Always is. As good as the game gets, as good as college football gets. Oklahoma and Texas. AllSooners.com will have loads there for you. Previewing this game, leading up to it. Then, of course, all day Saturday from the fair, from Dallas. Going to be fun at the Cotton Bowl. Always is. OU and Texas. So thank you so much for listening. Catch our post-game show, which we recorded certified fresh at the Cotton Bowl after the game. You can listen to that one, all the podcasts on iTunes, Spotify, Google, iHeart, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you have an Amazon-able device, just say, Alexa, play the AllSooners podcast. Also posted on our website, AllSooners.com. Click on the playlist on your phone, your tablet, or your computer. And, of course, you can watch all the podcasts on Hoover's YouTube page, John Hoover Media. That's it for now. We'll see you Saturday from Dallas. For Ryan Chapman and John Hoover, I'm Josh Callaway. We'll catch you guys next time.